I think I have real quality audience, 10 o'clock in the morning on Sunday. And, you know, as Mr. Zuckerson introduced, I have been at different leadership positions for many years. And I think I have built an intercultural competence to some extent because of, you know, almost 16 or 17 years of on-the-job training as a TESOL administrator. Still, when I was working on the topic, today's topic, I mean, I learned a lot. It was like a reflective practice, and I learned a lot in the process, so hopefully I can share what I have learned with you today. And when I thought about the topic, all of a sudden, the image of, you know, rainbow came to my mind. So, you know, any leadership position in ELT organization, it requires, you know, a lot of responsibilities. We should meet the needs and demands of diverse groups. And then we have to synergize the differences into a harmonious whole. So it's not an easy job. So how could we make ourselves as an intercultural leader? I mean, we have to explore through this session. Ecology of leadership. Pennington and, you know, a few other scholars, they started talking about ecology of leadership because, you know, in the change in ELT organization, it's always inevitable these days. We have to readjust our, you know, expectation of students and, you know, teaching formats, methodologies all the time. So in the fluctuating and ever-changing world of ELT organization, we have to think a lot more flexible. And then at the same time, we'll have to interact with diverse expectations all the time. So Pennington and Hokier, I mean, they state language program leadership is situated in the context of a globalized world and complex and rapidly changing educational environment. So with the complexity in mind, we need to find out what kind of leadership styles we should adopt or adapt to the needs of the given situation. So Murray also, you know, mentioned the characteristics of leadership ecology in her article, The Ecology of Leadership in English Language Education. So, you know, when we start, at first, I mean, I just was going to talk about leadership issues only. But once I started thinking, I mean, without talking about intercultural leadership, I mean, you know, the concept of leadership wouldn't work in ELT organizations or in any other organizations as well, but particularly in our field. So, you know, Kristen, she used the term intercultural navigator in her article. And, you know, among researchers about intercultural leadership, there are two trends. The first one is study of leaders working outside their home countries. And then the other trend is comparison of leadership behaviors and values across cultures. So we ELT leaders or educators, we can, you know, learn from both approaches. As you understand, leadership is some sort of culture phenomenon because you know, the values in a society, they influence the leadership styles, you know. So it's a deniable truth. And you know the name Hofstede, right? I mean, he did a really extensive research within IBM internationally throughout 40 countries, and he identified four, cultural dimensions and differences in leadership. And ever since, so many other researches have been done, but this is some sort of in-seminar work. So we always mention Hofstede, different dimensions of culture and leadership. And later, future orientation dimension was added. So usually, individualism, collectivism dimension. In the collectivism society, for example, there are always very close, in-group and out-group, division. So for example, in Korea, we appreciate collective or network or connections. So some, foreign people staying in our society, they may feel somewhat isolated, or they find themselves as expatriate people, or likewise, for example, number 3, uncertainty avoidance dimension. In Korea, for example, most of the people could be comfortable with some degree of uncertainty, but foreign teachers working in our society, sometimes they feel they find it unbearable. They want to get everything clarified. That's why there are kind of intercultural conflicts going on all the time. Korean, for example, administrators, they feel like, we have provided all the information. But, from the other perspective, expatriate teachers, they could say, it's not clear enough. Just obscure, vague. Why don't we spell out everything? So that kind of, conflict could happen all the time. So we always should think about this. Which culture are you from? And which culture are you in? So whenever you find something bothersome, you have to, consider this question. Consider the country and organization in which you currently work. And then you need to think about this. Where does it fit along Hofstede, different dimensions continuum? Every society falls somewhere in between two extreme dimensions, but still you need to know where the society, where I am in, belongs. In that way, you could develop some sort of sensitivity to cultural difference. And in case of Hofstede, it provides some insights, good insights, but at the same time, it provides just structural generalizations between lots of different cultural variables. So sometimes, within limited categories, they could generalize too much. So in Kennedy and Kennedy's case, they want to, provide us a tool, sense-making, contextual sense-making process. So in Kennedy and Kennedy's case, they just tell us, we can learn a lot from intercultural conflicting situations. We learn from each other a lot, so that's good. And then Osland and Bod, they came up with this model. for example, I have been working in a TESOL program for so many years. Whenever we had new teachers new to our program, they were a little bit perplexed, mainly because they had to face some cultural paradoxes, because their expectation of the typical Korean students' behaviors, passive, quiet, and obedient, it didn't work in our program. So they had to figure it out. At first they were perplexed mainly because they found our students, adults, pretty vocal, with a high level proficiency. They could sound really critical or even rude. But in the cultural sense-making process, our teacher trainers, they had to figure it out why, what happened, and what is the context. So they had to link schema to the given context. In that way, sooner or later, they realized that, okay, whatever they heard, they learned about just general behavior norms wouldn't work within specific context. So this is a cultural sense-making model. If we keep this kind of model in mind whenever we face cultural paradoxes, we can find out solutions. And dynamic qualities, culture, and interpretation. In a similar vein, we could try to adapt ourselves to the given situations. So there could be many different types of, hidden culture norms. Some series they came up with 3 different levels. At the bottom level, at the surface level, even outsiders could easily, get access and would understand. But at the real bottom level, only insiders, have a really full understanding. So isomorphs, this is a term. Some things by appearance they look similar. They seemed have similar meanings, but on the surface level they look similar, but in reality they are a little different. So it's similar with the culture paradoxes. For example, we talk about consensus all the time. Oh, we reached a consensus. But depending on the culture, depending on the leadership styles, the same word consensus could mean something different. For example, after a meeting, a Western leader or more inclusive style of leader could say, oh, we reached a consensus. But quite often, the consensus could say something different. So one example was among Chinese, working team. Of course, the leader mentioned at the end, we reached a consensus, but within the context, it meant that the leader, made a decision, and he expressed his decision, and the followers just agreed. And then the leader would say, we reached a consensus. So the followers just agree on his decision. So that kind of a little difference. And then, for example, the term meeting. In fact, I felt really frustrated at a certain point, because when I did the research, I met with the Korean program administrator and plus foreign teachers. They had weekly meetings. And then by appearance, it was a really open policy culture, and they had a weekly meeting and they shared almost all the information. So the Korean administrator believed that he expressed or he shared everything. But when I talked to the foreign faculty members, they told me, oh, the meeting is almost meaningless. We don't add anything to the agenda. Or, I mean, it's like just an information sharing process, and then it's just one-sided. So, I mean, in between, I felt so frustrated. And then as for the training packet, the Korean coordinator, I mean, she provided a training packet to the new teachers, right? And she absolutely believed that, she provided really, good training package. But the faculty members, the new faculty members, didn't take it that way. They felt like, oh, there was nothing, almost nothing to help us to adjust to the system well enough. I mean, so their sense of training packet was a little bit different. So there is no, just one magic leadership style that works for, all the different situations. That's why we need to find different leadership styles, and then we need to develop our awareness to different leadership styles, particularly within certain context. Otherwise, we cannot make ourselves a real intercultural leader. Think and share, transcultural critical instance. I mean, sooner or later, whenever you find something really interculturally conflicting, I mean, once you look back or once you think later, I mean, you will learn a lot from that conflict, or you learned a lot from that conflict. So please gather, certain ideas all the time. And then once we know leadership is an intercultural phenomenon, then we could think about some leadership components that could be accepted across cultures, and that could be really common in idealistic style of leadership. That could work throughout the cultures. Let's think about it. And first of all, let's answer to this question. A leader is born or nurtured? Both? It's easy. I mean, we could say both. Born and nurtured. I mean, up to a certain point, scholars kept talking about leadership traits and leadership potentials. Of course, I mean, all of us have certain leadership potentials, but how could we improve on those potentials to make them real, right? That's the issue. And I think I remember the phrase, leaders are perpetual learners. We learn every day, we grow every day. So unless we are willing to learn from others, we cannot make ourselves leaders. So we have, just quickly, Tori, would you pass it out? We have 4 different leadership styles that we could easily define or easily identify in our working environment you can take a quick look at 4 different types of leaders. So those 4 are gender neutral names, I think, but in convenience, I would just say she. Tissy, Pat, Jackie, Marty. Do you see Tissy in your working environment? Pat or Jackie, Marty? In Tissy's case, what do you think of Tissy? She could be entertaining and motivating, right? But she could be also overly dominant or intimidating. So, but she could be an externally oriented leader, right? She could be useful in a certain environment. I mean, she could be useful for certain functions such as, speech making, recruitment, personal selling, or building the program's image. How about the next one, Pat? She could be easily likable too. And then, easy to deal with. So she can make herself as an internal leader, right? So for a really, in a really complex organizations, for example, Tissy and Pat, they could support each other. They could be, complementary. So the next one, Jackie. She could be attractive and motivating too, right? And that kind of person could work better with inexperienced followers, right? In case she had some staff who had almost no experience or little experience, then she can make herself as a really good model. How about the next one, Marty? It's like some Korean administrator you can see easily, right? They show up at the, big occasions only for speeches or something, but still, we need that kind of person as well. So in any organizations, we will need, depending on the functions or depending on the demands of the program, we can utilize people's leadership styles. So, and then, this table provides really funny, exact metaphor for leadership differences in different cultures. Just easy to remember. Incubator. So incubator culture, they would nurture leadership, a certain type of leadership. How about guided method? Just interested in completion of task. Family oriented, they would nurture the leadership style. Powerful father figure. And how about Eiffel Tower? Maintain stiff, rigid, stable structure. So this could be the worst leadership style. And then, now let's see. Are there leaders' behaviors, attributes, and organizational practices universally accepted and effective across cultures? Of course there are. And Globe Research Program. Globe is short for Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness. I mean, it's a really extensive research results, almost 10 years. And they come up with, 6 different types of leadership, so charismatic, team-oriented leadership, participative leadership, human-oriented leadership, autonomous leadership, self-protective leadership. For example, I mean, the titles are self-explanatory, so you would understand what they mean. The last one, self-protective leadership. They are interested only maintaining their status plus, saving face. So, but depending on the cultures, certain leadership styles could be appreciated more. And situational leadership, in fact, we teachers are leaders. Unless we make ourselves leaders, how could we educate future global leaders? And then from now, a few leadership styles, they are directly relevant to our teacher functions in our classrooms. So situational leadership, the main message is, leaders will match their own leadership behaviors and styles to the needs of their followers. And then the styles, they divided the followers into 4 different groups: unwilling and unable, unable but willing, able but unwilling, able and willing. The category 4, number 4, will be a really easier group to lead, right? In your own classrooms, you can easily, group your students into 4 different groups, right? And then depending on to their maturity, depending on their, ability, depending on their readiness, we have to differentiate our teaching styles, our leading styles, right? So in case we keep practicing our leadership styles in class, we can, put ourselves higher, at a higher level of leadership in, our workplace and in any other organizations. How about authentic leadership? It is also, people-related leadership, right? And then, it's like a down-to-earth and self-aware person who is at the sidelines and empowers followers by being transparent and authentic. I'm not sure if we find these kind of leaders easily in the real situation still. We are working toward that kind of model, right? And then another relationship-centered mode of leadership, people-centered leadership. How about look at the core principles? Set clear standards, expect the best, pay attention, personalize recognition, tell the story, celebrate together, set the example. All those functions that are required for teachers, right? We should set up a certain, goal, objectives, plus, recognize all the students, different students, depending on their different functions and achievements. So all these functions, they are directly related to the teacher leader's functions. How about servant leadership? I mean, it is pretty well known, well recognized leadership style. And again, all those items that they support, that they argue for, these are needed for us as teachers in our classroom. So listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight. By foresight, we mean that we learn from the past and then, check the current realities and then set up our vision. So foresight, stewardship, it means, we make a full commitment to supporting others, right? To supporting our students, to support or, to help our students grow enough. And then, a few others, they belong to the group, change-oriented mode of leadership. Their focus is more on change. I love these categories. It's easy to remember, right? Visioning, expressing, explaining, extending, expanding. So 5 different categories. In the business associations, for example, they set up certain vision, and then they, make certain policies, and then they try to implement, details, and they just express, extend, expand every corner of the organization, so that everybody, follow, everybody try hard to achieve, the set goals. But in the process, there could be a lot of different dimensions. Even within the same organization, there could be some different cultures available. Can you imagine? Even within your working environment, by appearance, it is some sort of pyramid culture. But at the same time, within your own working division, among faculty members, or among, you could develop a flatter style of, more egalitarian style of leadership or environment. So even within one culture, there could be different cultures. So we keep talking about cultures within culture, right? And then, of course, we can apply, vision-led leadership to our classroom setting. You could teach, at different organizations or working environments. For example, when we think about a college level, we can set our vision, and then we could specify our vision through syllabus, right? And we set up our lesson objectives for daily, weekly lesson objectives. We want to make, our lesson objectives come true through our students' learning outcomes. It means we leaders always work with people, work through people. How about transformation leadership? So the focus is placed on transformation. So I think all of you are aware of these different leadership styles, right? Some are really familiar, right? Some of those styles are really familiar. Transformational leadership, it focuses on change, qualitative change of a good number of people, magnitude, a big group of people in more human terms, right? So particularly when we find ourselves as leaders in the ELT organization, in any ELT organization, particularly this kind of leadership is related because it's not necessarily just affecting. We want to see some transformation in our students, in our faculty members, in our staff. So not necessarily only affect. We want to see some change, visible change, right? So transformational leadership. In certain environments, we may definitely need this kind of leadership style. And global leadership, Nahavan D, his concept is particularly used by Paddington and her partner, mainly because they focus on change, they focus on globalization, and they focus on flexibility. So, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning, any ELT organization is supposed to change. In a fluctuating, ever-changing, situations, the leaders have to accommodate lots of different needs. So, somewhat future-oriented and flexible and global leadership will be needed. So we are going back to the questions or to the situations that we started with. So how do leaders help individuals and organizations work together? Right? The situation is change in ELT organizations is inevitable, right? Teaching methodologies is changing all the time. Lots of books are coming out almost every day. Lots of new teaching methodologies are coming out every day, right? And then we started talking about virtual classrooms in a good shape. And in this kind of world, what kind of teacher leadership or administrator leadership will be needed? So we should remember a few things. First, a language program is a context-responsive system that, where a lot of diverse culture interaction are required. So when we belong to a language program as a simple teacher, or as a staff, or as an administrator, we always keep this fact in mind, right? It is a context-responsive system of interactive components. The second one, the system is comprised of cultures, and culture interactions, then we have to adopt some successful strategies to resolve cultural conflicts. I mean, according to really extensive research results, they recommend five things for us to keep. So flexibility, open-mindedness, patience, or even optimism, and sense of adventure. So as long as we keep those 5 things in mind, as long as we keep some sort of mindset to be willing to negotiate over certain meanings, whenever we face intercultural conflicts, then we can resolve them relatively easily, as long as we are ready to negotiate. And then, as long as we develop a sensitivity to different leadership styles, we can make ourselves intercultural leaders. So we have, looked at many different types of leadership styles in different cultures, throughout different cultures. So we always should develop our sensitivity. And then, at the same time, we have to adapt our leadership styles to the contextual demands. It's not easy, but not impossible either. So, at first, I started my talk with an image of rainbow. I want to close my talk with the image of the yin-yang balance. So we leaders have to synergize the differences into a harmonious whole. And this is the end of my talk, and then I see world leaders in the audience. So in case you want to make any suggestions and comments, it will be appreciated.